I hired a woman to clean the house while my wife was at her publishing conference. An hour later, she called me and whispered, "Mr. Wren is someone else in the house." Every muscle in my body tensed. "That's impossible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew something was terribly wrong. "I can't stay here another minute," she whispered before hanging up. The truth I uncovered in my own attic revealed that my wife had been living a lie for 10 years. Before I tell you what I found in that attic, please hit the like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I want to see how far this shocking true story has reached around the world. You know how sometimes life throws you a curveball when you least expect it? That Tuesday morning in Asheville started like any other rare day off. The pharmaceutical sales circuit keeps me on the road constantly and without kids to anchor us at home. Vera and I have gotten used to our separate busy schedules. She was heading to a publishing conference for 3 days, and I figured this was the perfect chance to tackle some long overdue housework. I was surveying the cleaning supplies I'd laid out when my phone buzzed. Frederick Donovan's name lit up the screen. "Cyrus Buddy," his familiar voice boomed. "Please tell me you're not buried in work reports on this beautiful morning." I chuckled, looking at the array of spray bottles. "Actually, I'm about to become very intimate with every surface in this 1920s craftsman house." "Absolutely not. Coffee. Now. That little place on Patton Avenue. My treat." Before I could protest, Fred had hung up. That's Fred for you. Never takes no for an answer. I stood there torn between responsibility and the rare chance to spend time with an old friend. That's when I remembered the Montford Neighborhood Facebook group. I scrolled through and found a post from yesterday. Brenda Martinez, reliable house cleaning services. Part-time availability. Perfect timing. I could help someone who needed extra work and still enjoy coffee with Fred. I messaged Brenda, and within minutes she'd responded enthusiastically. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Fred, watching autumn sunlight stream through the cafe windows. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely relaxed. "So how's Vera's cookbook career going?" Fred asked. "Incredible. Her publisher series is taking off beyond anything we imagined." We were deep into conversation when my phone rang. Brenda Martinez. I figured she was calling to say she'd finished. "Mr. Wren." Her voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with terror. "Yes, Brenda. Everything okay? Is someone else in the house?" My blood turned cold. "No. Why do you ask? I'm having coffee with a friend." "I heard crying sounds," she whispered, breathing heavily. "It's coming from somewhere upstairs. I'm scared, Mr. Wren. I'm leaving right now." The line went dead. Fred was staring at me, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. "Cyrus, what's wrong?" I was already standing, throwing money on the table. The peaceful morning had shattered like glass. As I rushed toward my car, one thought kept echoing. There shouldn't be anyone in that house. No one at all. The drive home felt endless. My mind racing through possibilities. A break-in. But Brenda would have seen signs of forced entry. Something else. The closer I got to our quiet Montford street, the more my unease grew. When I pulled into our driveway, everything looked normal. The house sat there like it always did, with its characteristic craftsman lines and wraparound porch. But something felt different. The windows seemed too dark, the yard too still. I sat in my car for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at our front door. Brenda's terrified voice echoed in my head. Crying sounds from upstairs, in an empty house. The silence that greeted me felt too complete, too careful. My hands shook as I dialed 911 from our front porch. "Asheville Police Department. What's your emergency?" "I think someone might be in my house. My cleaning lady heard crying sounds and fled." Within 15 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived. Officer Martinez, a seasoned veteran, took charge, while his younger partner, Officer Williams, prepared to sweep the house. "Mr. Wren, please wait outside while we clear the premises." I watched from the sidewalk as they methodically worked through our home. Living room, kitchen, dining room, Vera's studio. They checked closets behind furniture, under beds. The process took nearly an hour. Brenda arrived as they finished the main floor, still pale from earlier. "I was dusting when I heard it," she told Officer Williams nervously. "Definitely crying." A woman's voice from somewhere above me. It wasn't TV or radio. I checked. It was real. Officer Martinez emerged from upstairs. "We've cleared the second floor. Now let's check attic access." In our hallway ceiling was a small square hatch, with a rusty padlock hanging from the latch. "This lead to your attic?" Martinez asked. "Yeah, but we never use it. Just old storage. Christmas decorations boxes." Williams examined the lock. This thing's ancient. Rust patterns suggest it hasn't been opened in years. Access is pretty small, too. You'd need a ladder. Probably not worth checking, Martinez agreed. If someone was hiding up there, they'd need a way down without that ladder. But something caught my eye. The dust around the hatch looked disturbed, and the padlock had cleaner spots where fingers might have gripped it. Officers, are you sure about that lock? It looks like... Mr. Wren, Martinez interrupted gently. We've been thorough. No forced entry anywhere. Most likely explanation, old houses settle. Pipes expand and contract. Could sound like crying if you're not familiar with the acoustics. After they left, I stood in our empty house feeling unsettled. The official explanation made sense, but Brenda's terror had been genuine. My phone buzzed around 7. Vera. Honey, I'm cutting the conference short. Something didn't feel right after you called. I'm driving back tonight. She arrived 2 hours later, slightly frayed around the edges. I walked her through everything. Brenda's call, the police searched their conclusions. That poor girl was probably just spooked, Vera said, rubbing my shoulders as we sat on our couch. You know how these old houses can play tricks. Remember when we first moved in, I swore I heard footsteps for weeks. Her explanation was reasonable, her touch comforting. But lying in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unresolved. The way that padlock had looked, the certainty in Brenda's voice, the timing of Vera's early return, something still felt unfinished. The morning light did nothing to ease the restlessness that had kept me tossing all night. Vera was already up, moving around the room with unusual urgency. I have to get to work early today, she announced, not quite meeting my eyes. Important client meeting with the publisher. They're pushing hard for the next cookbook deadline. I propped myself up on one elbow. You sure you're okay? You seemed pretty shaken up last night. Just tired from the drive back. She grabbed her purse and briefcase. You know how I get when my routine gets disrupted. After she left, I made the call I'd been dreading. My boss wasn't thrilled when I asked to postpone my 3-day client visit to Charlotte. Cyrus the Morrison account is crucial right now. What's so important? Something's happening at home that I need to figure out, I said, staring at the ceiling hatch in our hallway. The house felt different when I was alone. Around noon, while making a sandwich, I heard it. A soft thudding sound from somewhere above, like someone shifting their weight on old floorboards. I froze listening. There it was again. Definitely not pipes settling. This sounded deliberate, careful. When Vera came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room. Honey, I heard sounds from upstairs today, similar to what Brenda described. She set down her briefcase and gave me that patient smile. Just mice, sweetheart. Old houses like ours are full of them. They get into the walls, the attic space. But this sounded heavier than mice. Did you call an exterminator? She interrupted smoothly. I can get recommendations from the neighbors. Mrs. Patterson dealt with the same thing last year. I followed her to the kitchen. Brenda was absolutely certain she heard crying. Human crying. She pulled ingredients from the refrigerator. That poor girl was probably just tired, Cyrus. You know how some people dramatize things for attention. She's young, probably watches too many horror movies. She seemed genuinely terrified. What would you like for dinner? She asked brightly. I picked up some of that salmon you love. This pattern continued through the evening. Every concern I raised was met with a logical explanation, every question redirected to something mundane. When I mentioned the disturbed dust around the attic hatch, she suggested we needed better cleaning supplies. By the time we went to bed, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Her explanations were reasonable, her tone loving and concerned. But something nagged at me as I lay there in the dark. Every answer had felt rehearsed, as if she'd been preparing for these exact questions long before I'd asked them. The next morning brought no relief from my growing unease. Vera left for another crucial publisher meeting, her kiss goodbye feeling perfunctory, almost distracted. Once her car disappeared down Montfort Avenue, I found myself drawn to her home studio. I'd always respected Vera's creative space, the converted sunroom where she worked on her cookbook illustrations and food styling concepts. But today, suspicion overrode courtesy. If she was hiding something, maybe the answers were in plain sight. The room smelled of charcoal and fixative with afternoon light filtering through tall windows onto her drafting table. Portfolio cases lined the shelves, filled with what I assumed were her current projects. I opened the nearest one, expecting to find her usual food illustrations. Instead, I found sketches that made my breath catch. The drawing style was unmistakable. Delicate line work with bold, confident strokes that captured not just form but emotion. I'd seen this exact technique countless times growing up. These weren't Vera's drawings. They were Alara's. My sister Alara had been the artist in our family, the one with real talent, that left art teachers speechless. Even as kids, she could draw people in ways that revealed their souls. Her illustrations had a distinctive quality, part technical precision, part raw emotional honesty that you couldn't teach or fake. And here it was in my wife's portfolio. Alara had vanished 10 years ago, just when her freelance illustration career was taking off. She'd been working on a major project for Southern Living magazine and had finally gotten the recognition her talent deserved. Then one day, she simply disappeared. Her apartment was neat, no signs of struggle, but she was gone. The police investigation went nowhere. They assumed she'd gotten overwhelmed and run away to start fresh somewhere else. I'd always blamed myself for not pushing harder, not hiring private investigators, not refusing to accept their theory. But Alara had always been independent, sometimes impulsive. The explanation seemed plausible, even if it broke our family's heart. Now, staring at these sketches, a terrible timeline was forming in my mind. Alara disappeared 10 years ago. Vera's cookbook career exploded 9 years ago with Southern Comfort Reimagined, a series that launched her into the publishing stratosphere. The illustrations in those books had been praised for their fresh perspective and emotional depth. I pulled out more portfolios, my hands shaking. Page after page of preliminary sketches, concept, art character studies, all in Alara's unmistakable style. The flowing lines, the way she captured light and shadow, the distinctive way she drew hands and facial expressions. This was impossible. Vera had never shown this level of artistic skill before her sudden success. Her early attempts at illustration had been competent but unremarkable. Then, seemingly overnight, her work had transformed into something extraordinary, something that looked exactly like my missing sister's art. I sank into Vera's chair, portfolio pages scattered across the desk. The room felt like it was spinning. Where had these drawings come from? And why had she never mentioned finding them or having them, or the implications were too horrible to fully process. But one thought kept echoing through my mind as I stared at those achingly familiar sketches. How could Vera have Alara's artwork when no one had seen or heard from my sister in 10 years? I needed air. The discovery in Vera's studio had left me reeling. I stepped onto our front porch when Mrs. Patterson appeared at her mailbox across the street. Eleanor Patterson, our retired librarian neighbor, waved me over with a warm smile. "Cyrus, dear, how are you after all that police excitement yesterday?" I crossed the street, grateful for normal conversation. "False alarm, thankfully. Our cleaning lady thought she heard something." Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully, then paused. "You know, Cyrus, there is one thing I've been meaning to mention. It might be nothing, but what is it? Your attic light has been on every single night recently. Every night, like clockwork." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I'm sorry, what? The light up there?" She pointed toward our attic window. "It goes on around 8 o'clock every evening and stays on until nearly midnight. I've noticed it consistently for the past 3 or 4 years now." My mouth went dry. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Oh yes, dear. I'm quite the night owl. I sit by my bedroom window with evening tea and crosswords. Your attic window is right in my line of sight." She studied my expression. "You didn't know—" I shook my head. "I travel so much for work. When I'm home, I'm usually downstairs or asleep by then. I just assumed Vera had set up some art studio up there. I actually asked her about it once at the grocery store. Complimented her dedication, working so late into the night." "What did she say?" Mrs. Patterson's brow furrowed. "That's the odd thing. She just smiled and said something about inspiration strikes at all hours, then quickly changed the subject. It felt like she didn't want to discuss it. My heart pounded. "When you say every night, every single night for years now, Cyrus, rain or shine, weekends, holidays, someone is definitely up there." The pieces were forming a terrible picture. Alara's artwork in Vera's portfolio, my wife's sudden artistic success, years of mysterious attic activity that coincided perfectly with my travel schedule. As I thanked Mrs. Patterson and headed back inside, I remembered Vera's text from earlier. The conference had been extended through tomorrow. She wouldn't be home tonight. For the first time in years, I would be alone in the house during those mysterious evening hours Mrs. Patterson had described. Tonight, I was going to find out what was behind that rusted padlock. At 11:30 p.m., the house felt different without Vera's presence. The familiar creaks and settling sounds seemed amplified in the darkness. I'd been pacing the living room for hours, building up courage for what I was about to do. I retrieved the stepladder from the garage and positioned it beneath the attic hatch, as quietly as possible. My hands trembled as I climbed up, flashlight gripped between my teeth, a pair of heavy-duty pliers in my back pocket. The padlock looked ancient in the beam of my flashlight, but when I tested it, something felt wrong. The metal moved too smoothly, the mechanism too well oiled for something that supposedly hadn't been touched in years. It took only 2 firm twists with the pliers before the lock snapped apart with a soft click. I lifted the hatch cover slowly, and immediately a wave of air hit me that made my stomach lurch. This wasn't the dusty, stale smell of forgotten storage. This was the unmistakable scent of human habitation. Body odor, cooking smells, the sharp tang of art supplies, and something else I didn't want to identify. Someone was living up here. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled myself through the opening. The space above was larger than I'd expected, the sloped ceiling just high enough for me to crouch. But what I saw in the sweep of my flashlight beam defied every assumption I'd had about our house. The attic had been converted into a makeshift living space. Art supplies were organized on crude shelves made from boards and cinder blocks. Canvases leaned against the rafters. A thin mattress occupied one corner, covered by a threadbare blanket. Food containers were stacked neatly beside a small camping stove, and books, dozens of them, were arranged along the floor. And hunched over a drawing table in the far corner, illuminated by a small battery-powered lamp, was a figure that made my world stop spinning. "Who's there?" The voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and fragile, but it hit me like a physical blow. My legs buckled, and I had to grab the nearest roof beam to keep from collapsing. She turned slowly, and in the dim glow of her lamp, I saw a face that had haunted my dreams for 10 years. Gaunt beyond recognition, her hair long and unkempt, her clothes hanging loose on a frame that had once been healthy and strong. But the eyes, those were unmistakably hers. Elara. The word came out as nothing more than a breath. I couldn't make my voice work, couldn't make my lungs function properly. She stared at me with an expression of disbelief so profound it mirrored my own shock. Cyrus. She stood on unsteady legs, one skeletal hand reaching toward me. "Is it really you? Are you real?" The flashlight slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. "Oh my God! Oh my God, Elara!" I crossed the cramped space in 2 stumbling steps and dropped to my knees, pulling her fragile form into my arms. She felt like she might break. All sharp angles and hollow spaces where there should have been muscle and flesh. We both dissolved into tears, 10 years of grief and loss, an impossible hope pouring out in that terrible hidden space above my own home. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered against my shoulder. "I thought you'd forgotten about me." "Never," I sobbed. "Never, never, never." As we held each other in that dim attic prison, one devastating truth kept cycling through my shattered mind. 10 years. She'd been here directly above my head for 10 unbearable years. When our tears finally subsided, I pulled back to really look at my sister. The lamplight revealed the full extent of what captivity had done to her. Her cheekbones jutted sharply beneath paper-thin skin. Her wrists were no thicker than my thumbs, and her clothes hung like drapes on a scarecrow frame. But her eyes, those were still unmistakably Alara's, still holding that spark of intelligence I remembered. "Cyrus, I never thought I'd see you again," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I thought you'd moved on, forgotten about me. How could you think that we searched everywhere? The police, private investigators, we never stopped looking." She gestured weakly at the makeshift living space around us. Artwork covered every available surface. Sketches, paintings, detailed illustrations that I now recognized as the foundation of Vera's career. This became my world, my prison, and my purpose. "Elara, what happened to you? Where have you been all these years?" She looked down at her hands, fingers permanently stained with charcoal and paint. 10 years ago, I was working late at my studio downtown. Marcus Brennan, he was a client, wanted some custom illustrations for his restaurant. He seemed nice enough professional. My blood chilled at the pain in her voice. He came by that night to review the sketches, but when he arrived, he'd been drinking. He started saying things touching me. Her voice dropped to barely audible. He tried to... I fought back Cyrus. I grabbed a heavy glass paperweight and hit him as hard as I could. I reached for her hand, feeling how fragile her bones had become. He fell backward, hit his head on the corner of my drafting table. There was so much blood. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing. I thought I'd killed him. "Oh, Elara, I was in shock, didn't know what to do. That's when Vera found me. She'd come by to invite me to dinner at your place. Remember how she used to do that? When she saw what happened, she took charge immediately. What did she say? That I'd go to prison for murder, that even if it was self-defense, my life would be ruined. She said it would destroy you and our family, to see me go through a trial, to have the scandal follow us forever. Alara's eyes filled with fresh tears. She helped me hide his body, then brought me here to keep me safe until things died down. I stared at her in horror. But that was 10 years ago, Alara. Why didn't you ever come forward? She convinced me it was too dangerous. And I felt so guilty, Cyrus. I'd taken a life, even if it was to protect myself. So I stayed hidden, and I tried to make myself useful. I created artwork for Vieira's cookbook career. It felt like penance, like my way of contributing while I remained in hiding. Something nagged at the back of my mind. Marcus Brennan, I said slowly. Alara, that name sounds familiar. Her face went white. What do you mean? I saw Marcus Brennan last month. He's managing that new farm-to-table restaurant on Pack Square. I even shook his hand when Fred and I had lunch there. He's very much alive, Alara. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Alara stared at me with an expression of absolute disbelief. That's impossible, she whispered. I killed him. I saw him die. The color drained completely from Alara's face. She stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language, her mind unable to process what I'd just told her. But I saw him fall, she whispered, her voice barely audible. There was so much blood. He wasn't breathing. Then someone made you think that. Someone wanted you to believe you'd killed him. The horrifying truth was crystallizing in my mind. Alara, if Marcus is alive and well running a successful restaurant, then everything you've been told for 10 years is a lie. She began to shake, her frail body trembling as the implications hit her. But why would Vera... We need to call the police right now. I interrupted, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. This isn't just about a missing person anymore. This is kidnapping, conspiracy, fraud. God knows what else. My voice was barely steady as I dialed 911 from that cramped attic space. 911, what's your emergency? This is Cyrus Wren on Montfort Avenue. I found my sister who's been missing for 10 years. She's been held captive in my own house. Within 20 minutes, our house was swarming with police officers, paramedics, and detectives. Detective Sarah Morrison took charge of the scene, her experienced eyes taking in the converted attic space. Ma'am, I need you to tell me everything, she said gently to Alara, as paramedics checked her condition. Alara repeated her story. The supposed attack, Marcus's apparent death, Vera's rescue and manipulation. Detective Morrison's expression grew grimmer with each detail. We need to locate Marcus Brennan immediately, she told her partner. The police found Marcus within hours. In the interrogation room, he initially denied everything, but when confronted with the evidence and told about Alara's decade of captivity, his facade crumbled. Vieira paid me $10,000 10 years ago. He finally confessed, tears streaming down his face. She said she wanted to teach her sister-in-law a lesson, scare her into staying away from you. Ooh, what exactly did she ask you to do? Stage an attack. Make it look real. I was supposed to grab Alara, she'd fight back, hit me with something. Then I'd pretend to be knocked unconscious, play dead. Vera had fake blood capsules, the whole setup. And after that, I was supposed to disappear for a few weeks, let things cool down. Vera said it would just be a scare, that Alara would be too frightened to bother your family again. His voice broke. I never knew she was going to tell her I was dead. I never knew she'd keep her prisoner all these years. As I listened to Marcus's confession, the full scope of Vera's manipulation became clear. She'd orchestrated an elaborate deception to eliminate what she saw as competition for my attention, then exploited Alara's guilt and terror to steal her artistic talent. Now they had to arrest the real architect of this nightmare. Detective Morrison coordinated the operation with military precision. We'll wait for her to return from the conference, she explained as officers positioned themselves around our house. We want her to see exactly what she's lost, her victim free, her lies exposed. I sat in our living room with Alara, who was wrapped in a blanket, an IV drip in her arm from the paramedics. She looked so small on our couch, like a ghost finally made flesh. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 10 years of hiding, she was sitting in plain sight in the very house where she'd been imprisoned. Are you ready for this? I asked her quietly. She nodded, though her hands trembled. I need to see her face when she realizes it's over. We didn't have to wait long. Around 6:30 p.m. exactly. When Vera typically returned from work trips, we heard a car in the driveway. Detective Morrison signaled to her team. Through the window, I watched Vera's Honda Civic pull up and stop abruptly when she saw the patrol cars. For a moment, she just sat there, engine running. Then she threw the car in reverse. "Blocker," Morrison radioed. 2 officers moved their vehicles to trap her in the driveway. Vera's car lurched to a stop, and she stumbled out, her usually composed demeanor completely shattered. "Where's Cyrus?" she called out frantically as officers approached. "What's happened? Is there an emergency?" Detective Morrison stepped forward. "Mrs. Wren, I'm Detective Morrison with Asheville PD. We need you to come inside." "I don't understand. What's this about?" They escorted her through our front door, and the moment she saw Alara sitting in our living room, the world stopped. Vieira's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and then absolute terror. "No," she whispered, then louder. "No, she's supposed to be upstairs. This can't be happening." She tried to back toward the door, but officers blocked her path. "She's mentally ill," Vera screamed, pointing at Alara with a shaking finger. "She's dangerous. I was protecting everyone. She killed someone." "Mrs. Wren, you need to calm down," Detective Morrison said firmly. But Vera was spiraling completely out of control. "I made her useful. I gave her purpose," she shrieked. "She was wasting her talent, hiding away like a coward. I made her famous. I made her matter. Ma'am, you're under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy." "You don't understand." Vera collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically. "I saved her. I gave her a life. Without me, she would have rotted in some jail cell." Detective Morrison nodded to her partner, who began recording on his phone. "Mrs. Wren, are you confessing to holding Alara Wren against her will for 10 years? She belonged up there. She was safe. She was productive." Vera's voice cracked completely. "I built something beautiful from her talent. I made something that mattered." That's when Detective Morrison played Marcus's recorded confession on her phone. Vera's face crumpled as she heard every detail of the staged attack, the fake blood, the $10,000 payment. The fight went out of her completely. She slumped forward, handcuffs clicking into place around her wrists. As they led her away, I stared at this woman. I thought I'd known this stranger who had shared my bed and my life while torturing my sister just feet above my head. The woman I had married had never existed at all. 6 months later, I barely recognized the woman sitting across from me at the downtown Asheville cafe. Alara had gained 20 pounds of healthy weight. Her hair was professionally cut and styled, and most importantly, there was light in her eyes again. "The therapist says I'm making remarkable progress," she told me, stirring honey into her tea. "Dr. Williams thinks I'm ready to start the speaking engagements next month." It had been a long road to recovery. The first few weeks after Vera's arrest were the hardest. Alara suffered panic attacks, nightmares, and periods where she couldn't bear to be in enclosed spaces. But with intensive therapy, proper nutrition, and the unwavering support of family, she was slowly reclaiming her life. The breakthrough came when she decided to tell her story through art. The Girl in the Attic, a graphic memoir, was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Page after page of haunting illustrations chronicled her decade of captivity. Self-portraits, showing her gradual physical deterioration, detailed drawings of the cramped attic space, and most powerfully images of her dreams of freedom. Birds flying through open windows, sunlight streaming through trees, people embracing in open fields. The publisher, Beacon Press, had been eager to work with her once word spread about her story. They understood they weren't just publishing a book, they were giving voice to a survivor. The memoir became an instant bestseller, but more than that, it became a phenomenon. Ilara's story resonated with abuse survivors across the country. Her illustrations, raw and honest, showed that art could be both a survival tool and a path to healing. "I get letters every day," she told me, pulling out her phone to show me emails, "from women who've been trapped in abusive relationships, from people who thought they'd never escape their circumstances. They tell me my story gave them hope." She started speaking at conferences about psychological manipulation and domestic abuse. Next month, she was launching art therapy workshops for trauma survivors at the local community center. "I keep thinking about what you said that night," I admitted, watching her sign books for a small group of fans who'd recognized her, "about how I should have looked harder when you disappeared." She looked up from her signing, her expression gentle but firm. "Cyrus, you found me when it mattered most. You saved my life. But 10 years. For 10 years I survived, and every day of survival made me stronger." She handed a signed book to a young woman who was crying. Every line I drew was a day I didn't give up. Every sketch was proof that my spirit couldn't be broken. The book launch event that evening was held at Malaprop's bookstore, packed with supporters, survivors, and people whose lives had been touched by her story. As I watched Alara speak confidently to the crowd, I marveled at her transformation. Art kept my soul alive when my body was imprisoned, she told the audience. It was my voice when I couldn't speak my freedom, when I was trapped, my hope when everything seemed hopeless. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Later, as we walked through downtown Asheville under the stars, Alara linked her arm through mine. "You know what the best part is," she said. "What's that?" "For the first time in 10 years, I'm not just surviving, I'm living. Truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep it's buried. And sometimes when we have the courage to speak it, that truth becomes a beacon of hope for others, lost in their own darkness." Looking back on this nightmare, I realized this betrayal stories taught me that the deepest wounds come from those we love most. For 10 years, I lived with a woman who had turned my own home into my sister's prison. God works in mysterious ways, if Mrs. Patterson hadn't mentioned that attic light Alara might still be trapped today. This grandpa story's experience showed me that we must always trust our instincts when something feels wrong. Brenda's terrified phone call, those strange sounds at night, the artwork that looked too familiar. All the warning signs were there. I should have listened to my heart instead of letting Vera's lies cloud my judgment. The most powerful lesson from these betrayal stories is that truth cannot stay buried forever. Alara's incredible strength to survive, to turn her pain into art that heals others, that's God's grace working through unimaginable suffering. Her recovery proves that even after the worst betrayal, hope can still flourish. This grandpa story has taught me that sometimes the person sleeping next to you can be a complete stranger. But it also showed me that love between family is stronger than any deception. Alara's journey from victim to survivor to advocate demonstrates that God can transform even our darkest experiences into light for others. These betrayal stories remind us that justice may be delayed, but it will not be denied. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that shattered your world? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more incredible true stories. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light.